the Agile brand.
Welcome, everybody. This is Paul Foley, and you're listening to Bulk Exchanges, where we explore the human stories behind heavy civil construction and technology. Along with my co-host, Rachel Mahoney, we will be introducing guests from all areas of our trillion-dollar industry, from the legends that shaped modern infrastructure to the next generation who will revolutionize it. We will discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies for what's next. All right, we are back at it here. This is Paul Foley, and I've got my co-host Rachel Mahoney over the other side of the pond today, actually over in Bristol in the UK. Rachel, how's it going over that side today?
It's fantastic. It's a little later here than where you're at. We're approaching 10 p.m., but could not be more looking forward to our guest today and recording another episode. I think it's a little different than what we normally do, but a fascinating individual, and I think it's going to make for a great conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. You've heard me talk about Noah Campbell. He's the CEO and founder of Built Robotics. You've heard me talk about him for quite a while now. So, with that, I'm going to introduce our guest today. Noah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, happy to be here.
Good stuff. Well, before we get into or dive into some questions, we're super pumped to learn more about Built Robotics and everything that you're working on. I'd like to just revisit how you and I met back in 2017 or 2018, I believe it was. David Warner from Red Horse Constructors. They're a leading edge high end home builder here in the Bay Area, Northern California. David, we were working on one of his job sites. David told me that he wanted me to meet these guys who are working on some leading edge robotics for that related to the type of work I was working on. So it was pretty cool to meet you guys back in those early days. You were set up in San Francisco. So Greener Excavations, my company, got to meet you. So something else I'd like to add here, I'd never actually met a tech founder in person up to that point. So it was pretty cool to meet you. And, I just want to say hats off. And I really commend everything that you've been working on since. But I never thought back then when I met you first, Noah, that I'd end up a tech founder myself with Bulk Exchange. So it's funny how this thing all comes back full circle. So immediately I was just super impressed at your drive back then and your can-do spirit. So with that, Noah, you founded Built Robotics back in 2016, aiming to bring automation to heavy machinery, which is what tied into my world. What inspired you to merge construction with robotics, and how has that vision evolved since the early days of your company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I kind of grew up around construction. My dad was a carpenter when I was young, and then when I was in high school, he was trying to flip a couple houses, and I was the cheap labor that kind of made those projects pencil. So I spent a lot of time in the summers working for him, doing a little bit of everything. Roofing, a little bit of landscaping, grading, painting, um, sort of some basic electrical work. And that kind of gave me a firsthand appreciation for what it really takes to build a home, to construct a building. And I kind of took that. Actually, I mean, immediately after I sort of stopped working for my dad. This is one summer in college. I think I told him I was like, well, I'm done with this. I'm never going to do this again because it's hard work. You're up early. It's hot out. It's very
For
physical,
sure.
very demanding job. And I went to college and studied engineering, studied computer science, and kind of, sort of put it in my rearview mirror. But then fast forward, I got a job at Google, and then I started another company in the e-commerce space and sold it to eBay. And after that experience, I took some time off and I spent, 6 months or a year thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I just kept on coming back to construction. I remember the feeling of, driving around with my dad as a kid, and he'd sort of point at this house or that building and, tell me that he worked on, put an addition on there, or he'd, put a roof on this home or whatever. And that feeling of, I had a tremendous feeling of pride, I think, knowing that my dad had literally left a mark on the world and made something that people were going to use for years or even decades to come. And that I think is really what I find to be so sort of important and meaningful about the construction world. And so it's why I just sort of kept on circling back to it. And then this is at the same time that sort of the self-driving cars were really taking off. Waymo obviously was the leader then and has been the leader up until now. And I kind of looked at that and I said, hey, there's a lot of technology in these self-driving cars that actually could be applied to off-road construction and heavy equipment. And I felt at the time that there actually would be fewer barriers to getting that type of stuff rolled out because, you're not on public roads, you're on private land, you're moving at very low speed. Big one is that, our robots and really most heavy equipment applications, if there's ever a dangerous situation, you can just stop the machine. And that's not really true for a car driving on the highway. If it slams on its brakes, it's going to cause an accident. So for these kinds of reasons, I thought that if anything, we had a better chance at getting to commercial scale with heavy equipment, autonomous heavy equipment, and that's largely been true. So we've now deployed on over 25 projects. We've done a little bit of variety of different sort of verticals or segments in the construction sector. We've done some residential building, we've done some highway construction, and then really the market just kind of kept on pulling us into energy and really into renewable energy in particular. So we've now decided to really focus the company 100% on solar. I think it's just an incredibly exciting part of the construction industry. I think it's probably the fastest growing segment as far as I know anyway. People don't realize it, but solar is now the number one new type of energy production in the U.S. So it's bigger than coal, it's bigger than natural gas, bigger than nuclear, and part of that is because of things like the IRA and other government initiatives. But really, at the end of the day, it's just the cheapest form of electricity in most of the U.S. and sort of the southern U.S. particularly. It's it can be as cheap as like 2 cents a kilowatt hour, which is cheaper than natural gas and everything else, way cheaper than nuclear. So that's just been this incredibly interesting thing for us to learn about. We now have two robots in market. We have a robot that digs trenches, which is useful for putting cable underground. So electrical cable, fiber optic cable. There's a tremendous amount of buried cable on a large solar farm. And then our newest robot actually constructs the foundation for a solar farm. So most solar farms use what's called a pile foundation. You can imagine tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of steel beams that are hammered into the ground, and then the solar panels are mounted onto those beams. So our robot goes out there and drives these beams into the ground at really a few millimeters of precision. It's kind of amazing that a giant machine is able to achieve that kind of tolerance.
Yeah, Noah, I loved that you had taken something in automation and it happened through opportunity to coincide with something that's incredibly important to the world and to the industry, which is around renewable energy. And so I can imagine, to your point earlier with self-driving cars, how there's so many variables when you have other humans on the road where you can't deploy a stop or some other safety measure. When you can use automation in a scenario where it's a very repeatable process, but also a very complex and difficult one, and you can optimize for that. I thought that it was great, and also as we'll encourage our listeners to do later and go to your website, some great statistics about the fact that the U.S. has lagged historically in solar when there's so much opportunity here. And so again, it's the trifecta of opportunity that you've been able to bring automation to something that's so environmentally necessary, but then also do it in a way that helps propel the U.S. to where we should be, is leading it in the sector.
Yeah, and just knowing you and what you guys are doing over there, Noah, and checking it out on your website, some of the environments, whether it's way outside, metro areas, perhaps in some desert type environments, which is hard to get humans or workforce to be able to put up with that. To see your rigs out there installing those solar panels and modules. It's super impressive to see it happen, and absolutely necessary.
One of the things that was really interesting to me as someone who was working in heavy civil for the first time and primarily having a background in other high tech endeavors is this idea that the industry has this strong history and pride around the humans that do the jobs, right? It's about the hard work, it's good work, it's tangible. I think you touched on it earlier. You can see the fruits of that labor on every road or if we're driving by a building. And it's, even in what we do, whenever we are bringing a technology to a solution in this industry, it's sometimes difficult to navigate that line between bringing something that the industry needs to help it be more efficient to meet the moment and where technology is headed, but also keep respectful of the relationships and the importance of that. And so, how do you, when you're talking to folks in the industry and getting them to take a chance on such a new technology, what has been your experience and how do you engage in those type of conversations?
Yeah, I think that the craft of heavy equipment operation is an interesting one because it takes tremendous skill. You know, like, the guys who operate equipment are they're almost like fighter pilots or something in terms of their ability to understand the dynamics of the machine. You know, a good excavator operator can like feel if they're hitting a cable on the ground, without even being able to see it, and just operate with, inches of clearance next to really critical infrastructure. It takes an incredible amount of skill to be a good equipment operator, but it's also a craft that is inherently based on technology. You're not out there with a shovel and a wheelbarrow in order to excavate the ground. You're actually running a piece of equipment which has been developed over decades, perfected over decades, and that we've actually iterated on many times. You can think back to steam shovels in the early 20th century, and then diesel cable-driven shovels, and then eventually hydraulic shovels kind of came to the fore for excavation in the
Mhm.
70s. So there's this kind of long tradition where the craft is inextricably linked to the technology, and I have a lot of respect for that history. And I think that what we're doing, robotics and automation, is just kind of the next iteration in the same journey that's been happening for over 100 years now. We always say that a robot is just a tool in the hands of a skilled operator, and it's a tool that in order to get the most out of it, you really need to have a ton of skill. You need to be able to run it correctly, set it up correctly, and sort of operate around it and really fill in where the human judgment and the human touch is necessary. Because for certainly our robots, and I think for the foreseeable future, that they can't operate totally independently. They very much need the support and the guidance and supervision of humans. So I think that that's kind of my perspective, the perspective that I share. It still is new, and I think people are always afraid of change and afraid of what's new. But what I find is that the people who are a little reluctant, if I just kind of give them a chance to set up the robot and run it, usually I see a smile come over their face, because the feeling of being able to kind of send instructions to this 100,000 pound machine and just watch it get to work, it's a pretty cool feeling. And I think that wins people over.
It absolutely does. I still remember quite vividly meeting you guys in your workshop area there in San Francisco, and that first moment of me seeing it all happen, just super impressive. And I like the way you described it there, the evolution of you know excavation equipment in this industry, because I've been driving since I've been knee high, but that's just because I've been, my dad is an excavation contractor and I grew up on a farm, so you're around that sort of equipment. But I remember one of the very first things that was told to me as I was learning was like, just treat it like it's an extension of your arm, Paul, and that's, I think what you're describing there is just continued evolution of the technology and of the hydraulics and of the machinery parts to what's out there today and what's coming for the future.
Yeah, and that brings me kind of to the second part of the same theme there, Noah, which is, you talked about how you get over that initial resistance by just getting them involved and letting them have that firsthand experience or exposure to what you're doing. Obviously, we know that in an industry that has been operating the same way for generations, there's often a lot of the companies that work in this industry, they've been around for multiple generations. They have familial connections from grandfather to father, father to son, son, to daughter. And you know we we all respect that, and there's a tremendous amount of reverence that I think we should and do have for the folks that have come before and what's being done. And having done about 25 jobs now, what do you think is the biggest challenges? You talked about when you feel a hesitation getting them out there, but what other challenges are you seeing in trying to get over this barrier to make the case that, it's not really a choice at this point. Automation has to happen with all of the challenges for the industry, the labor shortages, the ability to compete with what other countries and other technology are coming. What are those big challenges for you?
I think there's a maybe kind of a reputation or a perception that the construction industry has, which is that it's technology averse as a maybe like a bias or just a general way of thinking that, construction companies don't want to use technology. And what I found is that that's really not true. What is true though is that they have very high standards. The technology needs to work. It needs to work right the first time. It needs to be reliable, and it's a high bar. It's a really high bar when you're creating, frontier technology, basically technology that's kind of at the limit of what we as a society know how to build today. Because there's so many videos and kind of jokes out there of robots, doing dumb things, whether it's your Roomba just like banging into the wall over and over again. That's definitely something that happens quite commonly. So I think that trying to make a technology that's reliable enough to be used in production day in and day out in sort of hot dusty environments, that I think is a challenge. But if you can do that, then people get on board. They see the value.
Absolutely. And your robots are designed to operate excavators autonomously on job sites. Could you walk us through how the technology works, Noah, and what are some of the examples of projects where these autonomous systems have really made an impact? I know drilling must be right up there, which continues to blow my mind of where you guys are taking all of that. Can you give us some examples of the types those types of projects where you guys are really leaning into and excelling in?
Yeah, our core technology consists of what we call the exosystem. So it's basically a kind of a autonomous upgrade package that has a high end supercomputer in it, a bunch of GPUs, RTK GPS, lasers, cameras, kind of an array of sensors. And you're able to basically strap that onto the back of an excavator and transform that piece of heavy equipment into a robot. And then you can use that robot for a variety of activities. And the two activities that we're focused on today are digging trenches. So, the trench, long sort of hole in the ground. Usually you put cable or pipe in the ground. We're particularly focused on trenches for solar. So you're putting in electrical cable and fiber optic cable for large solar farms. And then the other application that we're focused on is pile driving. So on most solar farms, you have tens or even hundreds of thousands of piles that are basically these long steel beams that are driven into the ground. And then the solar panels are mounted on top of those beams. So our robots go out there and they actually drive the piles into the ground. Another application that we're developing right now is drilling. So drilling in harder ground is necessary. You can't just directly drive the piles into the ground. You actually have to sort of drill a pilot hole, and then you can hammer the pile in following that pilot hole. So really just looking at different activities, different scopes on solar farms that, are repetitive, that, may be dangerous, that are difficult to find people to do those jobs. That's kind of our strategy as a company over the next 5, 10 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I love just keeping an eye on it. And you continue to blow my mind on how fast you guys are evolving and moving forward. And several of our partners, suppliers, and contractors, using bulk exchange, they're looking, at guys like Built Robotics, just at what you guys are doing. Shout out to the Trappy brothers. They've got a quarry up there in West Sonoma. Just very open minded and forward thinking guys from the industry, just looking into what's next. What's when it comes to equipment to run their quarries or run their job sites. So I want to go back to something that Rachel touched on, which is the labor shortages, which is very front and center to some of the major goals that bulk exchange has in bringing more people into the industry. Labor shortages have been a big driver behind innovation in construction. How do you see robotics addressing this shortage, Noah? And what role do you envision for human workers in a more automated industry?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Necessity is the mother of invention, and the labor shortages are acute in the construction industry, and I think really even worse in solar. And the reason for it is just, yeah, solar farms are typically built pretty far away from population centers. We just were on a project recently that had about 750 people working on site, and 680 of those people were travelers, folks who had come in from hundreds or thousands of miles away, who maybe are bringing a travel trailer and living there. Maybe they're, away from their family for months at a time. And it's really challenging to hire enough people with the specialized skills necessary in order to build something as complex as a solar farm. That you just generally can't find the people local to where the solar farm is going to be constructed. And so that, I think, is our focus is trying to help alleviate some of those labor shortages and really create tools to be a force multiplier for the craft workers on a solar farm. So I think that, and if you look at the backlog too, the amount of backlog in solar projects right now exceeds the total number of gigawatts of solar farms deployed in the country. There's tremendous demand, and there's just very difficult to build as fast as the demand would like us to, as the market would like us to. So that's kind of our goal, is just to, yeah, be a force multiplier and enable craft workers on solar farms to get more done.
And another perk too, Noah, this comes up a lot. We hear this all the time from some of the best construction programs in the country, is that for a long time there was a perception about work in the construction industry as being only one thing. And you guys and what you're doing and the type of technology that you're bringing to bear, it brings us an excitement, I think, for the next generation, right? To re-envision what being in construction means and all of the different opportunities that are out there. So you can get those great engineers and computer scientists and next generation of brilliant minds. And, doing something like you guys are doing at Built, it makes it cool and helps recruitment and helps bring in the best minds to this industry.
Yeah, I just got back from Dirt World event over in San Antonio, Texas, and I was just super impressed. There was 12 or 1,400 contractors from across the country, and just how progressive and forward thinking everybody was in the room. Just the most successful companies out there are leaning into this. So that is where this is all headed. For every five people leaving this industry, only one comes in. So we must do more with less. It's as simple as that. So
Yeah, and so being mindful of everything that you've shared. Again, so honored to talk to you and hear about what you're doing. That truly is best in class, and what we all need in this industry for the future. Paul and I are very passionate about the type of folks that are likely to make this happen. And one of the common denominators that we find is having grit. You need it in the industry and in construction, but you also need it in technology. And so you are sort of the epicenter of grit. Having to do something for the first time, innovate, go through all the challenges of literally breaking ground and figuratively. And so yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is grit to you, and how do you look for those with that quality in what you're doing at Built?
I think it just goes back to that old Thomas Edison quote that invention is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of truth to that, probably more than I realized when I started Built. but it just takes a lot of work. You know, you have to kind of, as you said, when you're working at the frontier, at the technology frontier, um, there aren't the sort of established best practices. There aren't there's not this sort of like, network of vendors and suppliers who can just kind of like give you the exact part or component or whatever that you need. You have to kind of get creative. So, we have to repurpose components that maybe were designed for other applications. Like there's actually a lot of electrical parts on our robots that were designed for boating, just because that's another, being offshore, that's another kind of really tough environment where you need to have really rugged components. And so we're kind of bringing those in, repurposing them, and then applying them to construction robotics. And I think that while it can be challenging, and while just, it takes time to sort of build hardware and iterate and develop, this new technology, what I find very, I don't know, I guess the sort of the guiding light for me is talking to customers. And so whenever we talk to customers and we show them one of our robots and I hear wow and like, this is clearly the future, or, I could use this on a project that's starting, next month or whatever. That to me is incredibly invigorating, and it really shows that this is the future of construction. The future of construction is going to involve automation, it's going to involve robotics, and it's going to enable us to build things that we never could have built before. So I think it's an incredibly inspiring place to be working.
Awesome. Well, we could continue to talk for much longer, but I just want to say, just want to applaud everything that you guys are doing over there, Noah, and I want to say thank you very much for coming on the show today. And I'd ask our listeners to go to the Built Robotics website. It is very impressive. It looks like, Noah, you recently added a bunch of cool new stuffs to the site, so it looks awesome. So I'd ask our listeners to go there and check it out. And with that, Noah, thank you very much for coming on Bulk Exchanges, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Rachel. Happy to be here.
On behalf of myself and Rachel, we want to thank our guests and listeners for joining us on another episode of Bulk Exchanges, where industry meets infrastructure and shapes great conversations. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and also find us at bulkexchange.com and on socials at Bulk Exchange. And remember, until next time, keep building, listening, and learning.
The Agile brand.